College football purists will be happy to see Oregon and Oregon State on the same field while opposite the Apple Cup at the same time. That's good, I think, for college football. Absolutely. Got Spencer McLaughlin checking in from Locked On Ducks, Locked On College Football. And of course, Spencer would never drop the football before he hits the goal line.
It's one of the most baffling things. As a Pac-12 guy by trade, I remember, do you know the first guy to really popularize this disastrous play, Mark?
Not Deshaun Jackson.
It was Deshaun Jackson. Okay. At least to me. That's the first guy I remember doing it.
Yes.
And after, he did it, I think once or twice, I remember thinking, well, gosh, who could ever do that? And then Oregon benefited from that about 7 or 8 years later. And then it happened again on Saturday. And thank goodness for Jaden Lamar, hero of the Republic, Jaden Lamar, who just had the foresight to, why don't I pick this up? Why don't I just grab it, just in case? That saved the game.
And maybe simply his thinking was, I hardly ever get to touch the football during a game. I'd actually like to,
He kind of reached down with like a nervous hesitation of like, I'm going to grab this, but I don't want anyone to think I'm grabbing it because I think it's live, but I think it could be live. And okay, well, we're good now.
Spencer, Oregon fans are getting too used to their heart skipping, for this early in the season. This was not expected. 2 games, 2 close ones, although the Idaho game in control, but still 3-point lead in the fourth quarter. Dillon Gabriel might set an all-time completion percentage record at this rate. He's barely letting the ball hit the ground. Of course, so when I saw that the first score, the 24-14 score, and knew it was 17-14 in the fourth, I immediately did not get a chance to see any of that game. Had to jump to the box score to see how does a quarterback complete 41 passes and they score 17 points midway through the fourth quarter. A lot of missed opportunities in that game.
A lot of these, Mark.
A lot of those too. Yeah.
Yeah.
The old long drives that came up empty, a couple missed field goals, that sort of thing. Stopped on downs a couple times. That happened a few times. But the Boise State game, that was entertaining. I caught that one. Just your thoughts about what's ailing this football team at this point.
The offensive line. That is where it starts. That might be where it ends. I think there are other issues that arose during the Boise State game. The defense was really good right until it wasn't. It actually had, I think, 10 carries of 3 yards or fewer for Ashton Genty, who had 25 carries on the day. So if I told you that, and you said, wait, so there are 10 carries totaling less than 30 yards? Yeah. And he had 15 other carries? Yeah. How many yards do you think he went for? Well, I don't know, maybe like around 100. He went for 193 and 3 touchdowns. So there are some things to clean up there. That's more normal early season working out the kinks, though. The offensive line is the biggest concern because they've given up 6 sacks through 2 games. They've had a turnover because of a miscommunication between Dillon Gabriel and the center where the ball was snapped to him, and then he took off running, and then he gets popped, and the ball is jarred free, and Boise State recovers and then scores a touchdown 2 plays later. And it's just been a disconjointed mess. They haven't been able. They had 2.9 yards a carry running against Idaho. They found their footing on the ground in the second half against Boise State, but not the way it doesn't look like the Oregon offensive line of last year, which is odd because 3 of the starters are the exact same guys. But new center, new right guard, injury in fall camp, it's thrown a wrench into things, and they haven't been able to fix that yet. So I think that Dillon Gabriel is playing well. He's not the problem, but he's not the solution either, in that he's not a cure-all. He's not someone who can just go put the team on his back. He is an efficient distributor of the football. He is effective. He's a good quarterback, and he's not playing his best. He's not quite seeing and feeling blitzes and adjusting protections the way he should. He's missed a couple of open guys, but he's still completing a high percentage of passes. So I think if the offensive line settles down, he settles down and plays his best football. And he played better, I thought, against Boise State than he did against Idaho, actually, even though the numbers don't reflect it. And if the offensive line settles down, the running game comes into play, and that opens up a lot of things for this Oregon offense, which has been extremely balanced the last couple of years.
So, yeah, I don't think there's any question with Dylan Gabriel's track record and with the resume and production past of the weapons on the field that if the offensive line's doing its job, the rest is going to fall into play. But is that a reasonable expectation? Are there injuries involved? I see that they're working out two centers right now, trying to figure out who's the guy.
Yeah, that's the biggest hurdle I think that they face is who should start at center. Should it be Charlie Pickard, the former walk-on who started week 1, or should it be who they expected to start at center going into this year, Iapani Lalaulu, or Poncho as he's referred to, and then you put in Nishad Strother at left guard and move Marcus Harper over to right. That unit seemed to be much better and more consistent, particularly in the ground game. They picked up pressures better, I thought, as well, in the second half of that Boise State game. But they didn't play for the entire second half. They played for, I think, most of it. I don't know the exact snap count numbers, but they're trying to mix and match. And Matthew Bedford, who was supposed to start at right guard, he got hurt in fall camp. That's looking to be a bigger deal than we maybe thought previously. And they also have another injury to an offensive lineman that might have slid it and started for him, Davey Uli. So it's just been kind of a mixing, matching, poking, prodding, trying to figure out what's the right combination of guys. How do you consistently get a push in the run game? How do you protect Dylan Gabriel and avoid the miscues that have derailed the offense at times? And we saw a bunch of penalties in week 1, and those were spread across the board. So I think that for this Oregon O-line, I expect it to get better. I don't think Oregon fans can expect it to be at the same level that it was last season when they gave up 5 sacks over the course of the whole year. They've already given up more sacks than that in 2 games against Idaho and Boise State. And you better fix this stuff now before Ohio State comes to town, or that defensive front is going to destroy you.
Genty's an impressive back, no question about
Yes.
that. He runs like a man, just runs hard, like doesn't take a play off, doesn't take the ball out of bounds unless he can help it in any such way. So when you look at the 15 plays that you pointed to before that produced all that yardage, are we looking at schematic issues, just getting whipped off the line of scrimmage? Or I saw a lot of Genty dragging guys downfield being part of that as well.
Yeah, Oregon's tackling has to be better. It was pretty poor, and Ashton Genty deserves a lot of credit for that. But Oregon's best linebacker and most experienced guy in the room, Jeff Bossa, I mean, he got beaten in 1v1 situations with him several times, and certainly you expect Genty to win some of those battles, but you should expect Bossa to do that as well. He's been battling an injury. I don't know if he's quite at 100%, but if you look at his long touchdown run, that was the only play I felt like where the defensive line truly got moved around. But I think Oregon's just not playing perfectly sound, assignment sound football. If you look at a couple of the other run plays that he had success on, the defensive end who should be setting the edge jumps inside, and then Genty just reads it and bounces to the outside, and there's nobody home. And these are guys who were playing on Oregon's defense last year. Jordan Birch, Mateo Uyunglele each had one of those instances on Saturday, and that might just be one of those early season, not quite into the full swing of things mistakes that can be cleaned up. And if you look at his long touchdown run, that was one of the few times where the defensive line got moved around. I think the defensive line is great for Oregon. They've been really, really good. And they get moved around a little bit, and there's a big hole, and then the safeties just never show up in a run fit. And they fill down into the wrong place, and he just goes right up the seam and outruns everybody for a 70-yard touchdown, and he's untouched. I mean, wasn't some fancy trick play. It was inside zone. That's all it was. And they had a good double team on the offensive line, and then the linebackers, I think, got blocked, and then the safety was supposed to come down, came down too far and too aggressively, and it's just not gap and sound assignment football right now. I think those things can get cleaned up. I'm not that worried about the defense, even though they didn't play their best football last week. I don't think they played as poorly as 34 points indicate, because the offense, as they did in week 1, put them in some tough situations. And you can't turn the ball over inside your own 30-yard line. And you need to be able to put them in obvious passing situations where, Oregon's got a 27-20 lead. They go down and a fifth-year tight end fumbles the football, catching a ball on the flat, and he doesn't tuck it in time, and it gets jarred free, and, defender really just makes a good play. And then Boise, that's a lot different than Boise State getting the ball back down 14 or 10 points where they feel, we might need to throw the football a little bit here. And Oregon's pass defense through 2 weeks has been really good, Really, really good. Both quarterbacks have been under 50% completion percentage, and that could very well happen again this week against Oregon State. So the defense is not perfect, but there are things to clean up. But it's the offense that is not performing up to the standard. Because remember, Mark, they had 2 special teams touchdowns last week. They had 37 points. They had a great game-winning drive. Okay, that's phenomenal. It's got to be better. It can be better, and it has to be if they're going to reach their potential this year.
Spencer McLaughlin breaking down the Ducks for us here at the Voice of College Football. We would ask that you would please like the video and subscribe here, and then take the deep dive with Spencer on Locked On Ducks, Locked On College Football. It's always a smart take from Spencer, except for the few times he's disagreed with me. But besides that, no.
Yeah, other than those times where I'm blatantly wrong, I'm always right. I mean, Mark, 60% of the time, I'm right. Every time.
It's that clock adage about being right 2 times a day.
Yes, of course.
Oregon State, yeah, you mentioned 21-0 looks decent on the scoreboard, but I was looking that over, and 2 touchdowns late in the game, one after they stopped San Diego State from tying the game into the fourth quarter, got a fumble recovery, and then went 98 yards. So not the most prolific offense out of Oregon State, but 16 to 17 points is the spread. What kind of ball game are you anticipating?
I think Oregon State can cover that number. I mean, Oregon State can win this game outright if Oregon isn't careful. We saw it last week. The Ducks were at home. They were an 18.5 point favorite against Boise State. They didn't even come close to covering. And I think Oregon State at home, where they've won each of the last 2 matchups in this rivalry, they're going to come out with their hair on fire because of all the realignment news. And there's an extra wrinkle with that added now that the Pac-12 is going to add 4 Mountain West schools. They'll eventually add a couple of more. But that announcement, I think, solidifies that they won't be in a power conference, at least in the immediate future. Oregon is. A lot of Beaver fans resent Oregon for that. And I understand why they feel that way. So crowd's going to have their hair on fire even more than usual, I think. And look, Oregon, if they play to their potential, they can cover that number, win this game by 20 to 30 points. But if they play the way they have the last couple of weeks, Oregon State reminds me a lot of Boise State. Mark, they run a pro-style offense with a lot of single back sets. They're going to have inside zone. They're going to have play action off of it, but they want to run the ball first. They've got a dynamic running back. Oregon State doesn't have Ashton Genty, but they have Jam Griffin, who's a darn good football player. They've had a good offensive line through the first couple of games. PFF loves the way Oregon State's offensive line is played. I think Oregon State's defense is better than Boise State's. I think Boise State's offense is a little bit better, but they want to run the football, have play action, and a complementary passing game with a quarterback that doesn't scare me. So I think for the Ducks in this game, it's an opportunity to take a step forward towards reaching your full potential. You can't showcase everything in this game because if Oregon plays well, final score of this game be 42-10. Because Oregon State's offense, not super impressive over the first couple of games. Oregon State's defense, been quite good. And that's what you'd expect. Their former defense coordinator, Trent Bray, is now their head coach. And I think he is really, really sharp as a defensive mind. So for the Beavs coming into this game, they have to feel like at some level they're playing with house money, but it's also a major opportunity. I think fans will probably look at it and say, well, Oregon should win the game. And, our roster got gutted and all these things. But at the same time, as the realignment news breaks, you're trying to showcase the rest of the country that you should be in a Power 4 league. Well, what better way to do that than win a Power 4 football game against a preseason top 5 team in the country who's currently in the top 10 and also your arch rival? I mean, if you can win in this game, you could probably win any time because this should be the biggest roster deficit that Oregon's had over the Bees since probably 2018. I'd say probably 2018, last time Oregon won in Corvallis. They're 0-2 in their last 2 trips. So I think that for the Ducks, it's a game you have to win, and the pressure is squarely on Oregon here. I think they will, and it's just going to become a matter of how do they win? How does it look? Are the issues still persisting, or do they take another step forward towards playing better football?
Spencer, if I'm hearing this, I'm guessing you're hearing it 10 times at least more, that because it's Oregon, and because there is no national championship like there are for other schools in 1970 that are completely irrelevant to what's going on today, but at least it's a banner in a stadium somewhere that justifies that for college football fans. Oregon's, again, overhyped, overrated. They shouldn't be this good. They shouldn't be this highly ranked, although they've dropped to 9, I believe, in the national rankings. Your thoughts about possible overplays on Oregon in the preseason?
Well, I mean, you hear the Nick Saban term thrown around pretty often, and it's rat poison. And maybe this Oregon team drank the rat poison and heard the hype, and maybe that's my fault. I mean, I gassed them up all offseason. Why? Because when they make moves that get you players everybody wants, like DJ Harmon or Jamari Caldwell, who are studs at the defensive tackle position, or when you bring in Jabbar Muhammad in all conference cornerback, or you bring in Dylan Gabriel, a 6-year veteran with a proven track record of accuracy and winning football games. How else are you supposed to feel when you factor in all the returners they have from last year's team that was this close to going undefeated in the regular season? And that's why I predicted them to go undefeated in the regular season. They get an incredibly favorable schedule from the Big Ten. Ohio State at home, Michigan on the road. We know Ohio State's a much better team than Michigan is this year. And everything should work out that way, but you still have to play to your potential. And I don't think the season is over. You know, some Oregon fans, not a lot, but I get messages from people really worried about the year. I think it's fair to have concern. I'm not in full-blown panic mode yet because they haven't had a loss, number one. And number two, when you think about how Oregon played last year, Mark, they were a much better football team week 10 than they were week 2. They went down into Lubbock and they scraped by Texas Tech. They were trailing by 2 possessions in the second half and had to fight, scrap, and claw their way back into the game. And their defense played better over the course of the year, and the offense was better. The offensive line, by the way, struggled to run the football in that game against Texas Tech, and that was not the case for the rest of the season. So I think things can and should get better. It's just a matter of whether Oregon goes and puts that on the field, because they are worthy of all the hype they got this preseason. Doesn't mean they're going to live up to it, but it is not a media-constructed idea that Oregon is capable of playing for a national championship. You can't look at their roster and make any other argument. That doesn't mean they're going to play at that level. It means that they're capable on paper, and they have to translate that onto the field.
You mentioned the realignment news that's come down here in the last 24 hours. The 4 that have been plucked up, apparently, once the deal is closed by the Pac-2 / the Pac-12 / the Pac-6, I guess.
Let's take it back to the roots, Mark. Let's go Pac-8. Pac-8.
Well, it's got to be Pac-8 at some point here in the next 2 years. Yes, they've got 2 months, less than 2 years to get that done. But yeah, those schools, Colorado State seems to be the outlier in regards to the other 3 seem to be slam dunks from that conference. Your thoughts about those 4 and other possible additions? I'm looking at Vegas. I'm looking at Tulane, some other destinations.
Yeah, I think they're waiting to see what happens with the ACC. I think this is the best move you can make if you're Oregon State and Washington State. It's not the move fans want to make. They want to get into the Big 12 of the ACC. That's not happening in the short term, or else that's the avenue they would pursue. You go and get these particular schools for a couple different reasons, in a 3-in-1 sort of bucket. The 3 is Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State. From a football branding standpoint, are the clear-cut top 3 teams you would take from the Mountain West. There is no 4th that you automatically lump in. And so why would they land on Colorado State? Probably because they're in the Fort Collins area, which captures at least some of the Denver media market. That's my guess. Denver, I think, is a top 20-ish, top 20, top 30 media market in the country. That's probably why they landed on them over UNLV. Now, my suspicion is that they have a couple Mountain West schools on standby here. Because the Pac-12 makes this announcement, they do not have to announce who their next 2 schools are going to be until next summer. They could take all the time that they want. It's important, I think, that they make this first move so that they have a selling point to schools that they're going to try to allure. I would pick up the phone and call teams of the American and see if they're interested. They might not be, but I would pick up and call teams in the Sun Belt Conference, for instance, and say, hey, if we want to expand our reach down south, do we go into the Sun Belt? Do we grab Texas State, for instance, who have got a really strong football program at the moment? I don't see why that's not an appealing option if you're going to throw geography to the wind. But I suspect they have a couple Mountain West schools waiting on standby to form the best, Pac-12 that they can with only Mountain West teams. But what they're waiting for is the ACC. If chaos ensues in the ACC, which is possible, but I don't think likely, the most likely scenario is Clemson and Florida State leave, and then the ACC just continues as is. But if any of those ACC schools become available, you would take any of them, over another Mountain West team in 2 seconds or less. That's what you would do. So the Pac-12 is now going to wait. They've made this announcement. This is a really good first step for them, but they have to get at least 2 more schools by July 1st, 2026 before they can actually be a conference. So they're going to wait and say, hey, what if Cal and Stanford become available because the ACC does a Pac-12 and ceases to exist? Or what if they decide they don't like being in the ACC and they're able to get out and they'd rather come, play in a more regionally based conference? You take Cal and Stanford, again, in 2 seconds. What about SMU? They want to be in the best conference possible. What if they don't like? I imagine they'd want to stay in the ACC, but if the ACC implodes, then they become available. Or Syracuse, or Wake Forest, a Boston College, a Pitt. You look around, probably not Pitt, they'd go to the Big 12. But I think that for Oregon State, Washington State, and the Pac-12 is 6 teams right now. It's going to have to get to at least 8. I would call American Conference schools like Tulane, see if Memphis would be interested, or UTSA, and maybe have those 2 schools come over and say, hey, let's build a G5 league whose conference champ is going to get in to the college football playoff every single year because we're so much better. That's what the pitch has to be. Would Tulane and UTSA, for instance, see that as sufficiently appealing? I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know. Probably not, but it's not impossible for them to theorize, hey, if we leave with our brands, the American, it's now significantly weaker. And so their conference champ will have a chance to get the G5 playoff berth, but it won't be as strong of a chance as a league that's got Oregon State and Washington State, who are still looking like strong programs. I mean, for goodness sake, look what Washington State just did to Texas Tech on Saturday. They blasted them into oblivion. John Matier, a quarterback, ran for almost 200 yards. If you go into that league and you get it to 10 to 12 schools, like just hypothetically, the 6 that you have in the Pac-12 currently with the 4 new Mountain West teams, if you add Tulane, UTSA, let's say North Texas and Rice, you start to take a foothold down south, you've got a significantly weaker American Conference that is essentially Memphis and South Florida. And that conference champ is going to have a tough time getting in over a conference champ who's had to battle San Diego State, Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, Oregon State, Washington State. So that's the shortest explanation that I can give on that.
No, and it's a good one, and it's a lot that we covered this morning in regards to, but without the ACC slant on actually the implosion, because, man, I just got to think that there's a layer of Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State, if they can't get to a Big Ten or an SEC would be more likely that that's where the Big 12 wants to go with Pitt, as you mentioned. And then Stanford, Cal, they weigh their options in regards to, do we come back to the West Coast? We're much kinder to all of our Olympic sports. We keep everything on the West coast. We're more aligned out here. And if the television deal is anything close to what the ACC is, the new ACC, the trimmed down ACC, then Stanford and Cal could come back.
Yeah, and I think academically, Cal and Stanford have an inherent disposition towards rejoining the Pac-12. They like Oregon State and Washington State, of course. They were with them for a long time. But being in the same conference, which is about football, yes, but other things as well, with Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and San Diego State is fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that's going to go over with the Cal and Stanford boards of regents.
That's
maybe
as well.
Now maybe
Duke and
versus Duke, North Carolina,
Wake.
Yeah, like this is Georgia Tech is Virginia. In the ACC. Virginia, yeah, like this is not. These 2 things are not the same, and so if those considerations weigh heavily on the Bears and the Cardinal, they'll stay in the ACC no matter what. If they prioritize football more, or if they don't like the travel, then maybe they'd return. I wouldn't hold out for that option as being the most likely scenario for the Pac-12 to be able to get Cal and Stanford to come crawling back. But is it worth taking a look? Yes, because they have the time. They don't have to make an announcement on that front right now. They've gotten to 6. They'll need at least 2 more. but they can wait and see. This can drag out well into 2025, and I think that that's the most likely outcome here is they wait and see what happens. Do FSU and Clemson get out? If they don't, then okay, we go back to our G5 options and we figure out which two schools we're going to take. But even if there's a 1% chance that you could wind up getting Cal and Stanford back, you absolutely go out and explore the path that gives you that option.
Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, Locked On College Football. Spencer, it's always a great time talking college football with you. Is there anything in particular that you would like to highlight for folks?
Well, Locked On College Football and Locked On Ducks are Monday through Friday, plus bonus reaction episodes on Saturday on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts, widely available. And I also am the radio and TV voice of Southern Utah University Thunderbirds athletics. And the Thunderbirds, by the way, got to plug them here. First FBS win since 2013 last week against UTEP, and getting votes to be in the FCS top 25 for the first time since 2017. So exciting time for the Thunderbirds right now, and I call those games on ESPN Plus and KSUB all season long. So it's busy time for me, Mark. It is a busy time. I had someone, I felt kind of bad because I sort of chirped at him, but he kind of had it coming, but then we worked it out and it's okay. An Oregon fan, frustrated during the Boise State game, came at my Twitter mentions and said, why have you been so quiet during this crap? You're usually more vocal. And I was like, well, I was calling a college football game in El Paso. I've been a little bit busy. And then he was like, oh gosh, I forgot. I'm sorry or whatnot. And I was like, oh dude, so it's okay. It happens, but it's a busy time of year for me, Mark, but that's what football season's all about.
Folks, we love the passion. Sometimes it's a little misdirected, but we enjoy it. Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Spencer,
Yes, indeed.
you're busy. Thanks for making time for us.
Of course. Appreciate it, Mark.